Hey y'all, it's Alexis from Ask Alexis here for another comfy couch conversation. And guess what? I know I say this every week, we have a dynamic guest, but we have Ashley Easter here from Courage 365, and she is a unicorn. Why is she a unicorn? Because she is the first ever cult survivor that I met. And here's the thing about that. You're already intrigued. I know it. But that's a transformational journey that means that you have to like literally let go of everything you know and learn everything all over again. So we're going to dive right in. Ashley, thank you so much for coming here and being willing to share and sit on my comfy couch and talk about this.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm really honored to be here. I love your PJs. Like they're just adorable. This is just like my sweatshirt thing that I sleep in. So it's not as cute as yours, but
But is it
I'm
comfy?
loving the unicorn. What's that?
But is it comfy?
It's comfy. It's very comfy.
Then it
So,
meets the qualifications.
oh my gosh, yeah, I'm so thankful to be here.
Thank you for coming. So, Ashley, tell us about so how did you get into a cult to have to survive a cult?
So I was actually born into the cult. So I'll try to give you like the nutshell version, but there's a couple terms that most people who aren't in the cult setting aren't familiar with. So I'll also give you like some explanation of terms. Um, but if something doesn't make sense, go ahead and stop me and I will, I'll clarify. But yeah, so I grew up in an independent fundamentalist Baptist church, and both of my grandfathers were pastors in this denomination. And just to kind of put it on a scale, the Southern Baptist Convention, we thought they were liberals. So that's kind of like the scale we're on, just to give you like a,
So
a
I
way
need
to
to
think
make sure
about
I understand what you're saying. In your world,
that.
you thought that the people like that the Southern Baptist community you grew up in was a liberal community.
We were independent Baptist, and so
Oh,
we viewed Southern Baptists as the liberal ones. We thought that we were the true conservatives, so much more conservative than Southern Baptists.
they're the liberal ones.
We thought that they were. Looking
I'm
back now,
having
I'm
a
like, they are not liberal.
cognitive dissonance here because they're not the liberal.
Agreed.
That's
At the
how
time, I didn't
explained.
know that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead, carry on.
Yeah, so we were so conservative that to us, the Southern Baptists looked liberal. So that's kind of that's where we were on the scale.
So what did they do that was liberal? What was assigned as liberal?
So many things. Well, things like listening to contemporary Christian music. We listened to hymns and Southern gospel, and they would listen to you know, like what are the contemporary Christian people like Toby Mac, and just some of the more popular ones. That was like rock music, and that was dangerous and bad. They had a bit more of in our view, liberal view of women in the church. And so in some Southern Baptist churches, a woman could maybe preach from the stage as long as she wasn't a pastor, like Beth Moore. And so we were like, women should never do that. And I mean, Southern Baptists are very conservative, when you see the whole perspective of the world. But things like that, they could go to movie theaters, and we didn't go to movie theaters. Those kinds of things. They could dance. Yeah. And our bylaws at church, it said you can't dance.
Wow, in the bylaws?
Yeah, in the bylaws. They may have updated them now since I've left, but I downloaded a copy because I wanted to save that to be able to show people. But yeah, so I grew up in that. But there's other things that happen inside of it that make me identify my experience as a cult. So, like, both of my grandfathers were pastors in that denomination. One grandfather pastored a church in the north, and one pastored a church in the south. And we lived near the pastor that had a church in the south. So that's where I grew up. I went to church from the time I was, I want to say, like 2 weeks old, something like that. And we really didn't know very many people outside of our church community. Like, that was pretty much the people that we got to know and just didn't really have a lot of connections outside. On top of that, I was homeschooled. And yeah, so homeschooling can be a good choice for some people. I mean, we're in a pandemic, people have to homeschool sometimes. You know, Olympic athletes, they
No,
homeschool.
my mouth drop is because I hear your world getting smaller and smaller
Yes.
and
Well,
smaller.
it's about to keep going down. We got a couple more levels to go. Yeah, so you know, some people homeschool just because they don't have a great public school system by them, you know, lots of different reasons. So there's these different movements inside of the larger homeschooling movement, but there's one movement that's very religious, and it's called the Christian Patriarchy movement inside of the homeschooling movement. And yes, patriarchy is right in the name. So like
I
it's
was
about
gonna say,
adherence to the patriarchy.
oh my God, like the level of regulating I have to do to my nervous system to hear that that's a movement. Like,
Yes.
ooh, okay.
Yes, absolutely. So
Right.
basically, what they believed is men are to have power and control over women in the home, church, and oftentimes in society. A woman's role was to submit, get married young, say yes to sex, and really her life was going to be focused completely on homemaking and the family.
Are you sure this wasn't the meeting of the He-Man Woman Haters Club?
That was probably adjacent.
Okay.
The next room over.
I mean, I'm just saying, they seem like they have a similar mission.
Yes, yes, yes. So, homeschooling movement, inside of that is the patriarchy movement. Inside of that is another movement. It's kind of like those Russian nesting dolls, the Matryoshka dolls, where it's like just kind of gets smaller and smaller. Okay, so the quiverful movement, they take this verse from the book of Psalms out of context and take it just super literally. The verse is children are like arrows in a mighty man's quiver. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. So they take that verse to mean a man is blessed when he has a quiver full of children, and children being arrows. And the goal is to have as many children as possible so you can shoot them out like arrows into the world so they will sink into different sectors of society and influence the world really with this patriarchal ideology. So different sectors of society would be home, church, government, media, schools, every major sector of society. And I remember as a teenager listening to what was called, it was a lecture on the 200-year plan. So the 200-year plan was you have 10 children, those 10 children have 10 children, those 10 children have 10 children, on and on for 200 years. And at the end of 200 years, you'll have this astronomical amount of descendants. You will have shot them out like arrows into the world. And so you completely dominate the world through overpopulation with this patriarchal message. So that was the plan.
I mean, carry on.
And a woman's role.
Recap, because if I'm on the edge of my seat and having to catch up, let me just make sure I got
it. Okay, go for it.
So you grew up in, and okay, so you were home, the independent Christian church, right? Independent Baptist?
Independent fundamentalist Baptist.
Independent fundamentalist Baptists who are so strict that they believe that the Southern Baptists are liberal. And then they so much so that they want to keep you away from the world, and they homeschooled you. And inside the homeschooling community was the Christian patriarchal movement, were your grandfathers a part of that?
Well, my grandfather homeschooled my mom and my uncle, or my grandmother too. And so like, I'm actually like a third generation homeschool student. My grandmother was briefly homeschooled. My mom was homeschooled. My dad was homeschooled at some point. So I'm like third generation homeschool. So yeah, they bought into it too.
Okay. And then inside the Christian patriarchal sect, because these sound like sects to me, there is a some extremist group that says you have
quiverful.
You have to send your quiver kids out to the world to brainwash the world with this same He-Man woman hater ideology.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
So make sure I understand it, and I did have to throw a little shade in there because
good.
That sounds like So it sounds like something my mind, it sounds like the thing, my conspiracy, like I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but
Hmm.
I have to actively work not to engage in them because I can't be a little
Right.
bit skeptical. But like that, my skeptical mind is like, this is what the fuck I've been saying there. Like, you know,
No, it's true. Like it is
those are
actually a
founding
thing.
fathers. Like, oh,
Yeah, and there's a lot of Reconstructionist history taught, so like, America was a Christian nation. All of these people, who founded our nation were Christian. And basically, the part about shooting your children out like arrows into the political sector is there are people that have been raised up with this mentality. And I would say Mike Pence is pretty similar along those lines. And they are getting into local and higher up places in government. Even like the White House, I think since the Trump era, they started having Bible studies, and it was led by some men who believe that women should stay at home and not have jobs outside. So like they're actually succeeding in some areas, and they're very deliberate about it.
so what's their stance on race? So like it's
Ooh.
Christian patriarchal, but what about like
Hmm.
are there black man leaders?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because there was a lot of racism, um, a lot of covert might be too soft of a word, but like it wouldn't be said to somebody's face, but it was more jokes behind people's backs.
Explicit.
That was common.
Just so you know, that's
Um,
explicit racist.
right, right. But it was, I have seen people who would explicitly say things to people of color's faces, and we would have that explicit racism, but kind of behind the scenes, so we didn't get in trouble, if that makes sense.
No,
Uh,
that's how it's
yeah.
normal. That's not abnormal at all. So there's overt, I'm
Hmm.
racist and I'm proud.
Yeah.
There's complicit, I'm racist and I'm not proud. I may not know
Hmm.
I'm racist because this is
Right.
the way the world works. I'm allowed to make these jokes long as I just the same way I can't say, I can't be mean in public, but I can hold the mean views.
Right.
And I can
Yeah.
be silent against policies that don't do them. And then
Yes.
there's actively anti-racist, which means
Hmm.
work to dismantle oppressive systems.
Yeah.
Just giving those definitions out there.
That's good. I would say it was a
We're
mix of the first two. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
all
Depending on, the person, it was definitely a mix of the first two. But it was interesting. I was greatly influenced because there's one more movement that I want to tell you about inside of all those, and it'll link back to your question. So, homeschooling movement, patriarchy movement, quiverful movement, the last little movement inside, kind of like,
I just want to be clear. They take a metaphor literally.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. They do that a lot. Like even in Genesis in the Bible, that's obviously metaphor and can't be trusted as hard science, but they think it does. And that's a whole other conversation. um, but, kind of getting closer. And the last movement that I was in was called the Stay at Home Daughter Movement. And basically, it's this idea that if adult married women are supposed to submit to their husbands, like what do we do with adult unmarried women before they get married? Like we cannot have them not submitting it to anybody. That would be a travesty. So we'll have them submit to their fathers. Most of them would stay and live at home like I did. Some were banned from going to college. I wasn't banned, but I didn't go. And basically your plan was to like prepare yourself to be that wife and mother who would have all those children. And so, yeah, so my father, even when I was 21 years old, was still trying to tell me what I could and couldn't wear. And I wore pretty conservative stuff. Relationships, he wanted to dictate, if I could date somebody or not. Just pretty much any big decisions in my life, he felt like he had, even as a full grown adult, that he could have a say in my decision versus just like a blessing or something like that. Did you see that screen flash up for a minute?
I have a short in my USB.
Okay.
And it just did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has me on the edge of my seat.
Yeah. So to link it back. What's that?
I have so many questions forming in my mind, but I'm just listening. Keep going.
So to link it back to what you said, the people who I think really founded the stay-at-home daughter movement, and there's really thousands of stay-at-home daughters across the country. They that would be the Botkin sisters, Sophia, and I'm forgetting what her sister's name was, but they were children of some parents in the greater, patriarchal homeschooling movement. So they were kind of the first wave of it. But the second wave of it, there was a woman named Jasmine Bockins. I'm sorry, Jasmine Bockham, which is different than Botkins. First wave was Botkins. And Bachman was the second one. Sorry, I get the dyslexia there.
Bad with names.
Okay.
So I can't repeat what you just said.
Okay. Anyway, her name was Jasmine, and she was an African-American woman. Her father was an African-American man, and he had a church that was called, I want to say it was like Family Vision Church, something like that. And he taught all this patriarchal stuff. And he taught about the quiverful movement and stay-at-home daughters and, fathers controlling their daughters' dating lives. And Jasmine Bachman actually wrote a book about being a stay-at-home daughter. And that was the one that really influenced me because, I think I received the books from my parents just as I was graduating high school around 16. And they gave me the book. And I was like, okay, so my next step is to be a stay-at-home daughter. So there was certainly racism in the movement. And also there were a few token people of color that were there. And I feel like they were honestly preyed upon and used quite badly by a lot of the white leaders. Yeah.
Oh, well, so now that we know what all you were in, how did you begin to how did you wake up?
Yes. Okay. So I got into a courtship relationship where my parents, kind of oversaw a lot of things, but it ended up being abusive. I was actually engaged to be married, and
So you mean to tell me in a movement where men are taught to dominate, control every issue of women's livelihoods, there was abuse?
Yeah, surprisingly.
That?
Yeah, and that wasn't the only form of abuse I've experienced. There's actually been quite a list, but we'd be here for a couple hours. But
you do not have to have an unpacking ceremony on the comfy couch.
That would have to be maybe part 2. But
how many wives were the men allowed to have to get this quiverful village?
Oh, only one wife. So there was a family that I knew that had 14. Children. Yeah, 14 kids from one woman. Yeah.
No wonder you got to stay at home.
Right. Yeah. And then you're expected to school them all. So.
And no concern for the quality. She's supposed to be happy to do these things.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And if she's not happy, something's wrong with her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
You got it.
I just make sure I understand. These are the laws of that land. Okay. Continue.
Yes, absolutely. So, I was engaged to be married. I started realizing I didn't know it was abuse at the time until I went to therapy later, but I was like, I'm really getting scared. And so I broke it off. And, that was a really hard thing because I was a pastor's granddaughter. I also had a blog called Stay at Home Daughter where I taught people how to submit to the patriarchy like me. So when I broke off that engagement, it was pretty public in my community. And so that was really hard. And then on top of that, I developed post-traumatic stress disorder from the relationship. And so, the depression, the suicidal thoughts, anxiety, panic attacks, nightmares, just being really afraid all the time, that happened. And in the darkest point, it wasn't so much that I wanted to die. I just didn't want to keep living this way, And so that was really a painful time in my life. And what I would do was, because if I slept, I would have nightmares about it. And if I was awake, I couldn't stop thinking about it and the anxiety would be there. I would wait up late at night, because if you have a decent sized family in a small house, like that's the only time you can be alone. So I would like put on some headphones and turn on music, probably Southern gospel music or something like that. And turn it up just really loud, so I couldn't think, I couldn't feel, I couldn't hear anything other than that music, just to try to drown everything out. And when that was happening, there was a time about a year into all of this, things just didn't feel like they're getting better. And so listening to that music late at night, and all of a sudden I felt this, it felt like a heavy pressure that came over me. And it was weighty. It didn't feel bad. It felt good. It just felt weighty. And then my intuition started speaking to me. And I heard these words, something that I didn't think up on my own. It was like my subconscious mind thinking it up. And it was just like, it's gonna be okay. Something big, something good's about to happen. It's gonna be okay. Something big, something good's about to happen. And when I came out of that, especially from my background, I thought, oh my God, the voice of God has spoken to me, now I look at it and I'm like, well, you could call it God, or you could call it intuition or subconscious mind.
I'm
but
a spiritual awakening. I've had an experience like that. And because Christian stories were the only stories in my mind, I was like,
yep.
Jesus.
Yes, exactly.
I get it.
Yes, exactly. But pretty soon after that, a woman who briefly went to our church and quickly was like, this is not for me. She worked at a coffee shop, and she invited me to come visit her. And so I did. And when I got there, she introduced me to this guy who also identified as Christian, but he believed in equality for women. And I didn't know that immediately, but she said he liked theology and I liked theology. And so we were going to talk theology. And the first thing he asked me is like, so what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a stay-at-home daughter. And he's like, what the heck is that? So I tell him pretty much everything I've told you, and he's, shocked and surprised. And he tells me about equality for women. And I really didn't want to hear it, because, that's just like evil feminism of the devil, dangerous stuff, and but he could still square it with his faith views, which, was kind of shocking to me. But I was resistant to it, because it was like, I don't want to hear this. I mean, don't defile me with your feminism.
You're going to turn me into a Jezebel.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. Talk, but that's the first thing I could think of. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That group. Sorry.
Yes. No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, I was, I didn't want any part of that. But I mean, he was nice to talk to. And then he found me on Facebook, and he started like kind of poking at me with questions and just asking me these questions. And it was annoying, especially because I didn't have the answers to the questions. And keep in mind, I'm a pastor's granddaughter, grown up in the church. I write a blog to 3,000 plus women about adherence to the patriarchy. I know all the theologians that support this stuff. I know my position like the back of my hand. And yet he's giving me these questions that I'm like, why? I hadn't thought of that before. And he wouldn't leave me alone. So I was like, you know what? We're going to have a debate. And homeschoolers, the stereotype is true. We are notoriously good debaters. It's just a thing. I did not
know that was a stereotype, but maybe I need some homeschooling friends, because I can enjoy a healthy debate.
Yes. So I went back home and I'm like, I'm going to prepare for this debate. And the way you do that is you study the other person's point of view all the way through, so you know what their weak points are, so you can kick the legs out from underneath them and win the debate. Well, the debate never happened, because in studying equality for women, I was like, oh my gosh, this actually makes a lot of sense. And I can square it with my faith. And some of the ways they've interpreted scripture aren't really accurate to like the original language and the cultural context. And then also looking at things like just how feminism and I didn't know the term womanism then, but just feminism had really helped a lot of women, and patriarchy had really hurt a lot of women. And so, like I said, the debate didn't have to happen, but it was terrifying because I went in here looking to find why he was wrong, and the research changed my mind, but I still had to live with these people.
I just
And
want to say, what was that like for you to be? It seemed like in my imagination that would be mind breaking.
yeah, it was terrifying. And I felt like I was faced with this choice of like, I can either keep questioning and keep going down this path that my gut is telling me is right and true and logically makes more sense, or I can just forget all of that, pretend I didn't hear it, and just keep doing what I'm doing. But I knew like I couldn't just block that out. Once you see
So
it, you
what it
can't
made me
unsee
think
it.
about? It made me think about Moses. Because he grew up being a prince. He ain't know no better.
Mm-hmm.
And then once he knew, he could not unknow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It felt like that. And like once you know, you can't unknow. And the way the whole cult system is set up, all the beliefs, like if you pull out patriarchy, like that's what everything's resting on. It's like a Jenga tower. You pull out one block and it just disintegrates. It falls apart. So now I'm questioning everything and realizing that, oh, well, if they lied to me about this, they lied to me about everything. And so I started ideologically changing. My family was not pleased at all. That was super tense and really anxiety inducing and scary for me.
How
Um,
did your father handle it?
he was not pleased. My grandparents and my parents and I think we had a total of like 8 hours worth of like intense discussion that wasn't profitable discussion. Like when I was part of the hours, I was just talking to my parents and they were calling me rebellious. And in their mind, rebellion is as of the sin of witchcraft. I'd always been taught that. And witchcraft is alliance with the devil. So, like, that's a lot to be heaped onto you. You're acting like a child by questioning your beliefs. And
So they
just
believe you're not supposed to question your beliefs.
Well, that's an interesting thing. They tell you to question your beliefs, but then they give you like safe sources where you can find the answers, and you can only find the answers to your questions within these sources. So if you have questions beyond that, those ones aren't welcome. Or if you look at sources beyond that, that's not welcome. Yeah. So I started changing ideologically then. And I really kind of had to have this sort of ultimatum with my family. I was like, you're either going to need to start treating me like an adult and I'll still live in your home because that's what you all want for me, being a stay-at-home daughter. Also, it's easier for me because I don't have a quality job because I was a stay-at-home daughter. And you're either going to have to treat me like an adult and I'll live at home, or I'm going to buy this crappy car and I'm just going to leave and I'll figure it out. Which probably it would have led me to homelessness, I think. And so we came up with sort of a solution that really didn't work that well. But like while I was physically in the house, I obeyed the rules. I was supposed to obey the rules. And then when I would leave and go in my car, like I could do things my own way. So
So
I
nothing changed?
not not inside their house. But when I got in my car, let me tell you, I got really rebellious really quick.
But what I'm
So,
saying is, so the reason I said nothing's changed because in my mind, but I've always been a rebellious child. They would not have me. In my mind, if the place I have freedom is the place I already had freedom, because y'all weren't looking in my car before, then
well, I
nothing
didn't have a
changed.
car before. So,
Oh, okay, well that makes a difference. I'm about to say because I was rebellious in my car before you said it was okay to be rebellious.
right. No, like I was straight line. Like nobody ever had to check in on me. Like I followed the rules whether somebody was watching or not because it was so ingrained in me by the cult. Yeah, but when I got the car, I started listening to Taylor Swift with the bass up, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
You were shaking off the Christian
Yes,
patriarchy.
yes. And I knew you were trouble. Like I would blast that. I went to the movie theater and I saw Son of God in the movie theater.
This is like your own room Springer. The Amish, they have when they hit adulthood, they get this period of time where they can not be Amish. They get to do whatever they want
Yeah.
in hopes that
Yeah.
you'll choose to come back to the life you know and be done with those
Mm-hmm.
rebellious ways.
Yes, yes. I went swing dancing, you know, just like hardcore rebellion, you know, just Taylor Swift and swing dancing. It's probably like the whitest thing ever.
Oh my God. Your parent, oh man, this is taking me back to like my own youth, and that I was considered to, and not that I'd had any independent Christian friends, but I did
Right.
try to get to know the Mormons, right? The Latter Day
Yeah.
Saint people.
Yeah.
Those commercials were quite convincing, and the bicycles look fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I was always a bad influence because of my independent mind.
Good for you.
And so it is kind of like, but I didn't know I was like, in my mind, it's like, I'm just thinking. I don't know why, like, oh, why do all my friends' parents hate me?
Yeah.
But they hated me because I was not a complier.
Yes. Yes. And that's why you're successful in life today, because, you know, the rules as we were given don't work.
I appreciate that. I've had a lot of challenges and turmoil, but one thing I've always been able to have, and my mother taught me that I was able to have, was an opinion.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was not always agreed with. It did not always mean that it changed things, but I was allowed to form and have one.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, let's get back to your transformation, because what I just want to, so I see there's like, I've decided to change inwardly, but I don't want to have to sever my relationships with the people that I love. So we figured out a way that I wouldn't show them who I'm becoming. They could just see me in the light they want to see me. And I'm jamming to Taylor Swift and her Bad Blood, all in my car, doing all my rebellious witchcraft swing dancing.
Exactly. Yes. And I
started devil. Sorry, it's hard. So I don't want to. I'm making light of your life because, as we're saying, and now my rational mind is like, that is ridiculous. But
it is
different if that's all you. If you water to a fish, they don't know that it causes resistance or that gravity exists.
Exactly.
So okay. So yes, you are swing dancing and singing and rocking out to your heart.
Yes. Yes. I even tried some contemporary Christian music, and I was like, wow, you know.
Oh, did it make you? Now let me ask you this: when you tried the contemporary music, because in my mind those are mixed, like it was send mixed signals, because you have a relationship with God the way you know it at that time. You have He's talking to you at that time,
right?
And so, but then everything you've been raised to know, so everything that would be in your body and your epigenetic instructions says that's the devil's music. So like when I listen to contemporary Christian, even though I'm not a Christian anymore, I can be very inspired and uplifted, but I don't have that, like, that's the devil's music association.
Right.
When you were listening, did you have any conflicting messages, or were you able to feel the inspiration?
Yeah, you know, it was one of those things, like for me, just kind of the way my mind works, when I can find the logic behind something, I can really dismantle the feelings pretty quickly for things like that. So part of the stuff that I started looking at was not only the patriarchal stuff, but also like, why did they say rock music is bad? And then, you know, it was like, oh, well, certain beats are, you know, of the devil. And honestly, there's probably some racism piled into there with the, you know,
there is.
Yes. But I started looking at that and I was like, there's actually nothing in the Bible that says you can't listen to Taylor Swift or contemporary Christian. Like, I think that was all a lie too. Yeah. So things like that, when I could kind of get the logic behind it, I felt the need to hide it. So there was maybe some shame. But when I was by myself, I was like, freedom, you know? Yes. But I started dating and dated different guys.
Without your father's approval?
Right. Yes. Yeah. And it's amazing how much better a date goes when, you know, it's casual and you're not like, you know, the first date thinking, am I going to marry this person? Like you can just kind of go into it a little bit lighter mood.
Now, let me ask you this, because though I will say this, a lot of women are not raised with the ideology that you were raised with. They're raised that I am whole once I become married.
Right.
And so dating has the pressure of wanting to achieve the status that marriage brings you.
Yes.
Because you were living in secret,
Hmm.
was it, were you, did it make dating easier because the talk in marriage would have been harder?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it was easier. I also, are you familiar with Matthew Hussey? He's like a love life coach.
Mm-mm.
Okay, he has a book called Get the Guy, and I haven't actually read the book, but at the time, I started listening to, he had like a mini course or something about how to actually date in like real society. And so like I followed all his rules of like being outgoing and, you know, just being chill and not like putting so much stress on things. And um so I think having gone through a course that taught me how to date alleviated some of the pressure to be able to be like, oh, okay, this can just be fun. And whenever it stops being fun, we can just end this. But as long as it's fun, we'll keep going. And then one day, maybe we'll keep going and we'll decide to get married. Um, but in that dating process, I met my husband and we were actually set up on like a blind date. And I went out with him a couple times. And this is a story, I don't know, this might be an Alexis exclusive. I don't know if I've told this part before.
I feel special.
But yeah, so we dated a little bit and he always would ask to pick me up, to take me to the dates. And I always was like, oh, I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. Because I didn't want him to see my family. I didn't want my family to see him. And there was another time he was like, well, I really want to pick you up. And so I was like, well, you know, pick me up from my friend's house. And I would like spend the night at a friend's house so I could be there and he could pick me up from there. And then one day he's like, I really want to pick you up from your house. And
Would have thought you were cheating on me.
right. Yeah. I mean, he's like, what's up with this girl?
Or like you're married and you didn't tell me, so I can't.
Right. Right. Um, and so he's like, I have a gift for your mom. And I was like, okay, damn, he's got a gift. Okay, he has to come over. And he bought some chocolates and it was really sweet. I can't remember if I think he got maybe brought me flowers. He brought her chocolates. And so we were going to go to like a little opera in our town. And so I gotten all dressed up. I come down the stairs. I can see his car pulling up. My dad knows that he's coming, and my dad comes up the stairs with a shotgun. And I'm not even joking. He came up the stairs with a shotgun. Now, he says it was a joke, but coming from the whole background that I had and him knowing that I had decided to have a relationship outside of his permission, even though I don't think my dad would shoot somebody, there was definitely a point being made.
That was so I will say this. I don't have children, but I have a nephew. And
Mm-hmm.
if a person threatened my nephew
Mm-hmm.
with a gun, there is nothing joking about that.
I agree.
And it
Yeah.
definitely, if you threaten them for wanting to do what bodies want to do,
Mm-hmm.
and for wanting to date, and he can't, that your father would have had a problem with
Yeah.
your husband's mother if that was my son.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And one interesting element, and this was not so much related to the gun, but more related to my husband's mother, like not getting upset with my dad, is my husband's actually 14 years older than I am. So I was 21 and he was like, what is that, 34 at the time? So he was a full grown man and he knew how to take care of himself. So he probably didn't tell his mother, but I imagine she would have been pissed off. um,
Yeah, I mean, just because that's a threat.
yeah.
And
So
you
my
threaten
dad,
me for wanting to love your child.
yeah, that that's how I perceive it. I know my dad has always said it's a joke, but that is my
It's
perception of the
not funny
situation.
to joke with deadly weapons. Just throwing that
I
out there.
agree.
There's nothing
I
that's
100%
funny to
agree.
me. But
Yeah,
continue. Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
That's not uncommon though. Lots of like prom night and all kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
I have to admit, I did it to my niece's boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it not with a firearm or anything. And
Right, right,
at the time I drank, I had several glasses of champagne.
right,
I was just freaking out about the fact that I thought they might have sex. So,
right.
and we intimidated them so much that they were so afraid of being late that they
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah,
wear
yeah,
anything after prom.
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah,
go ahead. So
yeah.
your
So,
father joked with your husband to be.
mm-hmm. And I'm like, let's get out of here. And so me and my husband, we just leave. He leaves my mom with a gift. And, my family kind of warmed up to him a bit, but um, I don't think that they knew how empowering my husband was, that he didn't believe in this patriarchal system, that he treated me with equality, that he understood the abuse I'd experienced and was very compassionate and empathetic about that, that he really was going to um, just give me so much freedom. And I fell in love with him. I totally married him for love. He married me for love, but also he rescued me. Like that was the physical out because there wasn't really another graceful way. I could see myself probably having become homeless otherwise. But he said things to me when we were dating, like I asked him about, what if I decided to become an ordained minister? Because that was like a no-no in my community. What if I decided I wanted to work outside the home? And he's like, baby doll, I don't care. He's real Southern, I don't care what you do, where you work or, what you become. Like, all I want to do is be with you. I love you, And I was just like,
Oh,
wow, somebody just wants me, not me for a role I'm going to play in their life. Um, and so anyway, we dated for 4 months. We were engaged for 4 months. We got married. Um, Not too long after we were married, I started coming out with some stories about different abuses I'd experienced and toxic things that happened in the cult community on my blog, which eventually was a line in the sand with my family, and I'm no longer in contact with them. But from that point, I've met so many other people who have had similar experiences, abuse, cults, churches covering things up. So that's how I started Courage 365. And that's why I do the intuition work I do, because, I can really help people tap into their intuition for safety, abundance, and success. But then that's why I'm super passionate about my nonprofit, Courage 365, because, you think you're alone, but you're really not. And having a community that can we're not like a direct service place, like a domestic violence center, but we're there to create a community so you don't have to do it alone. So you can get connected to those kinds of resources. So you can have education about what happened to you and how you can move forward in healing and empowerment. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that have happened in my life, and I can go into detail anywhere, but that's the bulk of my story.
well, that was had me on the edge of my seat, and so man, um, I heard you say that you started shifting your beliefs and
Mhm.
expanding your mind.
Yeah.
And once you understood that something could be questioned or something needed to be questioned, you questioned
Mhm.
everything.
Yes. Yes.
I think that there is the biggest, like, if you want to undergo a shift like you did,
Hmm.
you have to start there first. But
Yes.
the fact that you were able, like, willing and able to do it in your still oppressive environment, because
Hmm.
I tell you what, I know oppression when I hear it, and that is
Yeah.
oppression.
It was.
um the fact that you're still like you were able to says something. You really are courageous.
Thank you. That's very
um
kind.
because that takes a lot of courage to be willing to question everything and then to stand on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, I mean, we got a lot of the details of the story, but I heard you say that there's a line in the sand and you're not in communication with your family
Correct.
anymore.
Yeah.
That is a whole, like, well, I'll say this: if that is your wheelhouse, you're more than ready for your allyship journey, because you are used to being in a state of becoming.
Right. Yeah.
And an aspiring ally they have to be ready to uh, adopt a new identity.
Hmm.
What I like though about your group and your intentions is that you are abuse prevention.
Hmm.
And when I hear prevention, it makes me think of justice as a before act rather than an after
Yeah.
occurrence.
Mhm.
And so, what are the things that you can do to prevent people from being abused, but specifically if you were talking to the younger you,
Yeah. Yeah.
what would you
Well,
say, or what tips would you give her, or what questions
right.
would you have her ask herself?
Right. That's good. And I would say there's two parts there, because you can't always avoid being abused. Like I was born into this. And so there are some things we can do to reduce our odds and protect ourselves as best we can. And I'll talk about some of those steps in a minute. But real prevention starts with the people in power and the caregivers around you. Um, so what we do a lot is education. So people who come to our conferences and events, they're educated on what abuse looks like, what kinds of ideologies foster abuse, including patriarchy, racism, homophobia, and so many other similar things. We talk about, the power dynamics with abuse. Abuse is always, without exception, motivated by a lust for power and control, whether it is sexual abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, any of that. There can be other factors, like somebody can have anger issues, somebody can have X, Y, or Z, but the motivation is to put somebody under your power, to benefit yourself in some way while you're pressing someone else down. And so, teaching parents about what it looks like to, have a relationship with your children that is really based on mutuality, and they're humans too. And yes, there has to be some safety structures that you put in place, but so many times children are looked at as property, and that's not okay. Looking at your systems in marriage relationships, so if you're looking at your wife as a subordinate, that's not an equal relationship. That is an open door for abuse to thrive. If your church is based on a system where the people at the top have all the power and they're seen as the man of God and nobody else can have an equal say in the community, that's setting things up for danger. And so we really like to talk about those hard places where the system structures and people who are in power, who are caregivers, where they need to eradicate structures that are dangerous and implement an ethic of equality, because that's really where abuse starts. Abuse is about power and control. Ending abuse is about not having that power and control, having an equality between people, viewing them as equal humans. So that's something that we teach kind of ideologically, maybe to allies and people who are in power positions, then to people who have been abused or are vulnerable to abuse. It starts with education as well, because you need to understand what abuse actually is. One of the things that I have on my website, ashlyeaster.com, is an ebook that's for free. You can download it, and it's about different.
Put her website in the description, y'all.
Yes. It's about, relationships and abuse and what it can look like. We have, in our talks and in our Courage 365 show, soon to be the Courage Conference or Courage Conversation show, we're really talking about how you can understand these things, but then also connecting people to resources that can help them. One of the best ways you can keep yourself safe from abuse is by listening to your gut. You're not going to be able to get out of every dangerous situation, because there's other physical elements in the world that could lock you in. You could be born into it. You could be in a situation that's outside of your control. But listening to those gut feelings when a relationship doesn't feel right, pay attention to that. Get out before it gets bad. Um, when you are, going into a community that maybe just calls themselves a church, maybe just calls them themselves an MLM marketing, business, feel out, are they showing signs of a cult? What happens when people leave and disagree? Are they shunned? Are they really just, spoken badly of? Is there a freedom of leaving? So understanding what a cult looks like, understanding what abuse looks like is going to help, but then actively trusting your gut and fostering a relationship so you can, be on the preventative side and hopefully reduce the touch points where abuse could happen.
So, how do you think that with all of those touch points and all of those structures, how do you think that voting or the policy, like, so when we were talking about the spread your arrows, what was, I forgot
Yeah.
the song. Um, but then there was like a plan to put people into a 200-year plan to shift the world into this Christian patriarchal dominant perspective. I mean, and it says it in the name, like they're not even trying to hide that.
Right.
Like, to me, that makes them an enemy of democracy.
That is my opinion. That is
Okay.
my
Okay.
opinion.
When I think of what democracy stands for, and if those are the values and that is the plan, and the plan then is to infiltrate the systems and make laws that, like, it's literally everything that I teach that people say that's not true.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is true. And, ultimately they would love to see a theocracy,
Like that,
where,
like that's literally planned systemic oppression.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then I have more questions, although I am getting activated. Um, the the So one of the things that when I'm talking to my black friends or I'm talking to black people and we're thinking about like vacations or places where we want to go, they're like there's
Yeah,
nowhere to go where there's no white people.
right.
So but when you like you had to get out
Yeah.
of your environment,
Hmm.
how do you what are some of like well, I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
What what would someone who has to live in abuse
Hmm.
and has to heal from abuse at the same time, like how could they have some abuse prevent, what do you think would benefit them?
Mm,
And this
right.
leader, I have idea, like I like
Yeah. Well, it's it's very hard from a brain and trauma perspective to come to a place of full healing when you're still being abused. So I'm not saying that healing cannot come, but I am saying that it's going to be very difficult to reach a full level of healing when that's still being enacted upon a person. So that's why in a domestic violence situation or a cult situation, the first step is like, if at all possible, let's get you out of here. But there are situations where that's not possible. Some people, they're in a domestic violence situation, they realize it's not safe. They're in a cult, they realize it's not safe, but they can't leave because of their children. They can't leave because they don't have the finances or whatever it is. So those situations exist. What I would try to do is, in any ways possible, try to create time to be alone with yourself. Try to create even just 15 minutes a day where you can block out the rest of the world, where you can just hear your own thoughts, because that's when your intuition's going to come up and it's going to give you steps on how to move forward. Other things would be, if at all possible, sometimes you can, especially with the internet, you can find support groups online, or you can even attend support groups without people seeing them. Getting around other people who understand and get it, that community is going to be really helpful. Educating yourself on what is actively happening to you, so when you see it, you understand it. Like, gaslighting is a huge thing, whether it's an abusive relationship, whether it's cults, I'm sure whether it's a racism situation. And what gaslighting does is it tries to make you feel like you're the crazy one. It manipulates logic, it tells you falsehoods, and tries to distort your entire perception of reality. And that's really what I grew up in, an entire distortion of reality. But when I was able to access information to realize, oh, not only is this not the full of reality, it's actually only this small bubble here. There's other perspectives and beliefs and other places of, safety and protection, just other thoughts. And I can be educated on how they're going to come at me. So when they come at me, I know it's not actually quote unquote personal. It may feel personal, may be personal to you, but like, they're following a script. This is what narcissists do. This is what cult leaders do. Like, they didn't just get together and create these manipulations just specifically for me. Like this is a whole problem they have. This is on them. And so like I read a book called Recovering Daughters, and it listed all the ways parents would react when you said you don't want to be a stay-at-home daughter anymore. My parents acted exactly that way, like exactly. If I hadn't read that book, I would have thought that I was the crazy one. But when I read that book and realized they haven't read this book yet and they're doing all of these steps, then I realized, okay, this isn't me doing something wrong. And so being able to, mentally distance yourself, and realize this is a them thing.
Like
But yeah, ultimately
white
the
fragility.
intervention is escape. What's that one? I'm
Like
sorry.
white fragility. So when you read the book
Mm-hmm.
and it was all the things that they would do, though Robin DiAngelo is a white woman herself, in the book of White Fragility, it lists all the things white people, the responses that you get, all the gaslighting and like
Yeah.
it happened just like this. But what about? And well, I don't know if he meant it like that. And
Right.
um, but that is, I just have to say, you're pretty remarkable
Mm-hmm.
to be indoctrinated in something and harmed by it and to heal yourself because of it. Like those are several courageous steps that you took, and I'm sure you, and in the taking them it wasn't always easy. Obviously we heard it wasn't
No,
easy,
no.
but there were steps that you did take. And so then the question that I have for you, and then I don't know if I remembered to tell you, but more than likely I didn't, as my audience knows. You get to ask me a question I'm not prepared for.
Oh, okay.
You get
Yes.
to have that gelling in the back of your mind.
Yes.
Was it worth it to
A
leave
hundred
everything you
percent.
ever knew and forge your own path?
100%. I did leave everything, my family, my church community, like basically all the people I ever knew. I left all that behind, and there was a grieving process. It was painful. There's still pain involved, but I would never change it. Like freedom, it's everything, it's everything. And again, once you see something like freedom, like equality, like you can't unsee it, and you'll never be satisfied with something less than that. And so there is no way in hell I could ever go back into a community like that, um, knowingly. um, it was so worth it. It was worth everything I lost.
Um, I think that that is amazing because a lot of times when it's time to leave, your fears will tell you, oh, you can't live without. But for you to on the other side and say, oh
Mhm.
no, I live without and I thrive without.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this: have you found your people? Since the people you were born
Mm,
into were not your people,
yeah.
have you found your people?
Yes. Yes, I have. And I found multiple groups of people, because particularly when you're leaving an environment like a cult, you'll find a group a lot of times that's adjacent to it but has a little bit more freedom. So I moved from there to probably like mainstream evangelicalism, and then I moved from there to like progressive Christianity, and now I've moved to like just more open spirituality. And so yes, I found my people, and I found them over and over again, because as I evolve, I'm attracted to different groups are attracted to me. But yes, you can always build a community, I think, and I have found that, and it's wonderful.
And you brought up intuition, and we are all things. We talk intuition, and you're
Woo,
moon.
yay.
We got Moonbeam Mondays. So and that's what I call. That's my intuition's name. It's
I
my
like it.
the thing that I heard you say
Mhm.
was, so what I heard, not what you said. Let me clarify. Was that people who are in relationship with spirit, you can feel them out, and you began to feel people's relationships. So you had this community that had a different relationship with you, and
Mhm.
then there's more communities that were active and practicing the things that they teach, and then it
Yeah.
became open spirituality because once, so to me, the people who the Christian patriarchal people were not practicing Christian values.
Mm.
As I've read a lot of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and even when I hear the psalm you said about shooting your arrows, that does not necessarily, to me, mean children.
Right.
So to live your values, I got all sides. Sorry, I keep
No, it's good.
I'm distracted by the ridiculousness. Um,
Mm.
I lost it. Oh well. I'll catch it on the edit. But I really did lose it. So we will just cut that part out
Yeah,
and we'll move
we're
right
chill.
on. So Ashley, before you ask me the question that I just only now prepared you to ask, I heard you say your website, ashleyeaster.com. What
Yes.
all do you have coming up for the people to be excited about?
Ooh, yes, yes. So I actually have two websites. AshleyEaster.com is the one where I do a lot of my intuition work. Right now, if you go to AshleyEaster.com, it's on the homepage, AshleyEaster.com/toolkit, and you can download a free toolkit that has a meditation, journal prompts, and an ebook all about understanding the difference between your intuition and your ego, because those can get confusing sometimes. So that's a free gift. Then on for my nonprofit, courage365.org. And depending on when you catch it, we're right in the middle of a website update. So whenever this airs, it may be the good website or maybe the old website.
Both good websites.
Yes, yes. But there, that is all about our organization. You can find the Courage 365 Facebook group, and we have the Courage 365 show, and just so many opportunities for you to connect with other people who've experienced abuse or toxic faith communities. Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff coming up this year, but those are the two places you can find it: AshleyEaster.com, courage365.org.
And one of the other things that they have coming up is that they have decided to begin their allyship journey and understand the intersection of trauma and racism and how that could play out and how they can prevent that type of abuse. And guess who they've decided to work with on that?
Woo!
Me, obviously.
Alexis!
And so stay tuned for more of that because, as y'all know, if you watch this comfy couch, transformation is a journey. So they are starting that journey, and we are always happy to have people on team. Um,
Absolutely. We're so, so excited. You have so much wisdom to share with us. Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to grow and learn.
and by the way, don't think I didn't catch your signature on your email to me where it said peace and blessings. I saw that. I saw that. And so now, as my nerves are welling up, what do you want to ask Alexis?
Ooh, yes. Okay, so I actually wrote down a question.
Yes, that means I did remember to tell you.
Yes, you did. You did. So my question is, um, was there a time where you trusted your gut despite it making like logical sense? Maybe other people around you didn't agree. And if so, like what happened? What did you learn?
Okay, all right. So I can only tell the story in the context of 3 times that I heard the voice of my intuition before I knew it was the voice of my intuition.
Hmm.
So I was in the midst, the first time I was ironing my clothes, getting ready for work, and I just started dating this guy who was fresh off a breakup. And I was ironing my clothes, and I heard, "You're going to be begging him to love you." And I was like, "Huh?" And I tried to repeat it in my mind's voice, and I could
Uh-huh.
not, and I did not listen. And I was surely, for a few years in a situationship, wanting to be more than I was to him, no matter how much
Mm.
he would tell me he wasn't, AKA begging him to love me.
Mm.
The second time, I was in my corporate job, which was a casino, so it's like corporate nightlife.
Right.
But we had a new leadership team, and they were from South Africa. And the reason that,
Mhm.
in my same age, and the reason that is significant is because he was a white man
Mm.
who apartheid was abolished in his lifetime, and apartheid is perfectly studied best practices racism. So, like, where they
Mm.
enacted apartheid, they went around the world and studied different caste systems and systems of oppression and said, oh, we're going to use the things that work the best in order to divide. And
Ugh.
there you have apartheid. And so the fact that it was abolished in his lifetime, just like it was abolished in my lifetime, we were the same age. I was just the first to be fired. But I didn't know that it was because of my race. But while he was scrutinizing my every behavior, and like you, I was one of the people
Mm.
that, like, I told the line. However, I was
Yeah.
a naturally rebellious person. So if I did the right thing, I don't understand why you're constantly questioning me.
Right.
I heard the voice say, quit, you'll be okay. Every night before I went to sleep until I got fired.
Wow.
I
Wow.
could not quit because it did not make logical sense. And then I
Mm.
was a decorated employee. So
Wow.
me getting fired, like before he got hired, they put me on a commercial. I was nominated for Shine a Star, which is like Employee of the Quarter.
Yeah. Oh
I
my
was in
gosh.
extensive management training program. Like while he got hired, I was there. And I was running a department that lost all of its leadership due to a scandal. Um, in the height of our busy season, reporting to the CFO, and my department was beverage.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a whole thing. And then I got fired. And it was very traumatic because that also
Mm.
represented a lot of security for me, financial. Like it took me right back to being empowered. Like all those traumas
Yeah.
that I ran from to get there started bringing real loud. And then I got into myself, getting to know myself, and I had a spiritual awakening. And I was in grad school to be a counselor, a licensed practical
Mhm.
counselor. And I had taken 3 classes, and the last class I took was on ethics
Mm.
and confidentiality. But I had taken my multicultural competence class and the class that teaches you the different fathers of modern psychology.
Yeah.
And then I heard, quit, it's not necessary.
Mm.
So I quit.
Good. Yes. Yes. And what happened?
You're looking at what happened. Now I'm a personal
Yes.
transformation coach, but it was a longer journey though. And what I was an adult literacy teacher.
Hmm.
So it was a magic. It was an intuition. It wasn't an intuition. It was like my intuition. My moonbeam was teaching me to trust it. So
Hmm.
I was at my niece's birthday party. So I was in grad school when this happened. And I
Okay.
needed a job just to be successful at school. So I was at my niece's birthday party, and I was like, I just want a job where I make a lot of money and not have to work a lot because I'm going to be focused on school.
Yeah.
And my niece's friend's mother was like, "Are you good at math?" I was like, "I love math." And I'll get off on another tangent, but I have a relationship with math because the processes gave me security.
Mm.
Um, and so then she was like, well, it's not a lot of money, but it is for the hours. Would you be willing to be a tutor for an adult literacy program through Wayne State?
Wow.
So I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And then there was the instructor was kind of patriarchal in his views,
Whew.
or he was definitely chauvinistic. I'll say this: the
Yeah.
Black community is very matriarchal. So even the men who are chauvinistic aren't really they're only chauvinistic in their expectations of that woman around them in proximity, not like
Hmm.
what they think women are capable of or how they think
Got it.
they should be treated. 1 second. So then he he was like a teacher, and he's like, I've been teaching by myself for all this time. You just got to get in where you fit in. And I said, well, I would do the motivational message because I wanted to teach the world how
Hmm.
to like be in control of their thoughts, emotions, and feelings to
Yeah.
manifest the reality that they want to have. And so I would have that every day, and they were believing me. Like, so I would be
Mm.
meditating. I had already quit like grad school, and I'd be meditating on in the morning for what the motivational message would be, and then I would explain, and they would change their thought processes.
Wow.
And I did that for 3 years. And I also, be based on my moonbeam, started volunteering in prisons to teach alternatives to violence, which gave me my skills for facilitating emotional transformation.
Mm.
I happen to geek out on psychology and popular
Yeah,
psychology. I have my
love it.
entire life because I was running away from being a statistic.
Hmm.
And so then now I am a personal transformation coach, anti racism educator, and a consultant for organizations that want to know more. And I feel so self actualized. And I would not have if I would have taken the next class, which was the class on, what was it called? Adverse psychology, but basically on all
Okay.
the things that are wrong with you, which would have told me my spiritual awakening was a hallucination
Hmm.
and all these things. And then through trusting myself and getting to know myself, like I'm sitting here on my couch talking to you
Yes.
in my unicorn pajamas, everything that made me too much with this money printed pillow, too
Hmm.
extra, too loud, having the code switch, my hair is not straightened. You're teaching me about Christian patriarchal dominant He-Man woman hater club and we're having this laughing joking conversation about heavy things.
Yes.
And that's always been who I am. And so, like, it feels like since I listened to my intuition, I didn't have to change, although I know I did. I didn't have to change, the world changed for me. But really, the
Mm,
intuition allowed me to change my inner world. And so the outer world that is reflected back to me is different.
that's perfect. I'm glad I asked that question because that was a good story. That was a really good story.
And that was the really short version because once I started listening to my moonbeam, y'all, it has been like the downloads keep coming. I got a poem I'm working on. I got a workbook I'm writing.
Yes.
I'm meeting my people. Like there are people who think like you in the world, y'all. You are not as unique as you, no matter how much you think you're a unicorn, there's a tribe or a village, excuse me, not a tribe. There is a village of unicorns out there waiting on you. You just have to find the
Mm,
one that matches your stripes.
yes. 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 Seems like a herd of unicorns. Maybe is that the right term for a
Yeah.
group of unicorns? I
Or
think it's a herd, maybe.
stable. I don't know.
Something
But
like that.
you're gonna have me on Google after this. Um, so Ashley, thank you so much for choosing me to lead your allyship journey. Thank you
uh,
so much for telling us about your own personal transformation journey. And thank you so much for coming to sit on my comfy couch.
uh, it was, I mean, the honor was mine. I mean, this was so great. I had a lot of fun on the show, and yeah, you're just such an amazing person. Every time I, get to spend with you, I'm like, yep, another reason I know she's amazing.
Well, thank you. And I'm sorry, you're using that word, but I have to tell you. So we, in my work with alternatives to violence, we have affirmation names. And when I
Mm,
started with them, it was awesome, Alexis. And then in my last workshop that we facilitated, which I believe it had to be in January of 2020 because of COVID, I changed my name to Amazing Alexis because I wanted to do amazing things, and awesome described a personality trait. So when you say
yes.
that word back to me, that was just like a little bit, that was like a hug from the universe.
Yes. 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 I love that so
So
much.
thank you. You are amazing and courageous.
Mm,
And though I have had to do my own transformation, I cannot help but be inspired by you leaving everything you've ever known to build everything you wanted to become.
mm, thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Mm,
you. And you are always welcome back.
I appreciate that.